This guy lived around, again, 2,000 years ago, right? About the same time as Confucius, who we covered last time. Now, the key thing you have to understand about Aristotle is that, he makes a lot of assumptions, right? And you might be tempted to go, well, okay, that's stupid. How can you assume that? But you have to understand that back then, they didn't know shit, all right? They did not know why a rock would fall if you threw it. They did not know why, a tree grows or why the sun goes around, or they probably don't know anything, all right? And so in that time, when people thought about anything, it would lead to deep confusion. And probably, yeah, they'd be very confused, all right? And so Aristotle wanted to explain things. He wanted to explain things. And he made a pretty reasonable assumption, right? Even if I don't know anything, there's probably a reason why things are the way they are, right? There's probably a reason why things are the way they are. And so this assumption that he makes is that everything that exists must have a purpose, right? Now we would say, well, okay, that's questionable. But back then, he used it to explain a lot of things, right? So for example, a rock falls down because its purpose is to be on the earth and to be stepped on, whatever, right? And so to make a good road, right? A tree grows because its purpose is to provide shade or bear fruit or whatever, right? So everything that exists must have a purpose, right? And Aristotle used that to explain a lot of things. And so a good thing is something that carries out its function perfectly, right? So for example, a good violin is one that's played very well, it has a lot of tunes. A good tree is one that's big, has a lot of branches, provides a lot of shade, right? And then this naturally led Aristotle, and the qualities that a thing needs to fulfill its function, Aristotle calls it a virtue, right? And so the virtue of a tree, one of the qualities that leads to it fulfilling its purpose, might be to have big branches, provide a lot of shade, right? And a virtue of a school, for example, if a school's purpose is to educate children, then a virtue of a school might be the ability to inspire creativity, or having good teachers, right? There's a series of virtues that you have to have, right? And so a virtuous thing is something that has all the virtues and makes it a perfect thing, for example, a perfect school would have all the virtues of a school, right? And so it's very rare to be a virtuous thing, right? And now, what Aristotle thought then was, okay, well, what's the purpose of a human, right? If there's a purpose of a human, then every human should live to fulfill that purpose, right? And to be a good human, be a virtuous human. And he thought about it, okay, well, if he could think of a special trait that humans have that no other animal has, then that's probably the purpose of a human, right? And he thought about it, he's like, well, okay, the purpose of a human, what's unique about us is our rationality, right? Other animals can't think, they can't reason, they can't do math, right? And so the unique purpose of a human is to reason, right? Know what to do and how to do it, right? That's the purpose of a human. That's what it means to be perfectly rational, right? It's to know what to do at all times and know how to do it at all times. And so the virtues of a human allows us to do two things, right? I'm going to repeat myself here, all right? So there's two requirements to being a good human, right? And so Aristotle says, well, there's two types of virtues that all humans need to have, right? And so the first one deals with this one, knowing what to do. You've probably heard of this one. It's called the golden mean, right? It's like basically, it's about personality traits, right? So for example, Aristotle thought that everybody had a bunch of personality traits and they all lie on a spectrum between two extremes, right? So for example, your MBTI tests, right? On one end, you got the introverted. On the other side, you got extroverted, right? Everybody lies somewhere between these two extremes, right? And now for Aristotle, your personality traits might be something like, cowardice and foolhardiness, right? Now, what is a virtue? A virtue is the perfect balance between two vices, right? Because this vice here, cowardice, it impedes your rationality, right? You're too cowardly. You're too cowardly to do the right thing. And this one, the foolhardiness, it also impedes your rationality because now you're too you're too daring, and you always do the wrong thing, right? And so the perfect mean between cowardice and foolhardiness would be bravery, right? If you're a brave person, then you always know what to do in the situation, right? And there's a lot of different virtues that virtues of character, right? There's a lot of personality virtues that you have to have, like bravery, wisdom, humility, that kind of stuff. And it's all about a balance between two things that are irrational, right? This is rational, and then on the extremes are irrational, right? And so these are called virtues of character, right? It's like personality traits. And what he thinks they do is that these personality traits inform you of what kind of ends you tend to select, what kind of goals you tend to select, right? Guys, so for example, if you're a brave person, then the goal you tend to select in the moment would be one, that requires you to give out some of your courage, but not one that's going to lead to your death, right? And so if you're a wise person, then the goals you select are going to be perfect for the situation. So that allows you to always know what to do, right? Because these virtues of character, deal with what goals you select, right? And so, according to Aristotle, if you have these perfect personality, if you have a perfect set of personality virtues, then you'll always know what to do at every moment, instantly, right? It's just the kind of person you are, right? And then now the second type of virtue he thinks exists is called practical wisdom, right? This deals with how do you do things, right? Practical wisdom comes from training. He says that nobody's born being practically wise, right? It comes from a lot of moral training, right? You think through a lot of moral dilemmas, and you think through a lot. You live a lot, right? And then you become this wise person. You get this practical wisdom, and then you'll always know what to do to achieve the goal you select, right? And so do you guys see the correlation here, right? If you have the virtues of character, then you always select the right goals, right? And if you have these practical wisdom, then you'll always know how to get to that goal. You always know how to do the goal, right? And so Aristotle thinks that the combination of these two, right, the virtues of character and practical wisdom, that's what makes you a virtuous person, right? Now, a virtuous person is very, very rare, according to Aristotle. It takes intense training and intense wisdom for you to become a virtuous person. And what do you do then if you don't think you're a virtuous person? Well, Aristotle says you should just ask a virtuous person, right? If you know someone who's better than you at making these decisions, at selecting these goals, then you should just ask them, all right? Now, again, as I said in the beginning, Aristotle makes a lot of assumptions, right? So one of the assumptions that he makes, which we have pretty much already disproven, is the idea that personality traits even exist, right? A lot of psychologists recently say that personality traits are really not that important, and what really influences our decision is the situation around us in the moment, right? So, for example, this experiment called the Good Samaritans, right? And here's what it says. Have you heard of it?
I think I've heard of it.
Good Samaritans? Okay, so here's basically what happens, right? In Princeton University, there's this group of people who are studying to become religious leaders, right? So they're all selected based on their personality traits, being good people, right? It's a group of good people, right? Now they're given two different speeches. They're split into two groups and given two different speeches, right? One of the speeches is a job interview, right? It's like, here's why I should be fit for this job. And the other speech is a speech on the Good Samaritans, which is a biblical story about helping the poor and the needy, right? And then they had them walk along a corridor to get to a place, right? And then an actor would trip and fall in front of them, right? And then each of them were either given ample time or told that they would be, they're either told that they had a lot of time, or they were told that they were running late, right? And so what they observed is that not only did those who had a lot of time, help the actor more, but those who memorized the Good Samaritan speech also helped the person who fell more, right? And so this proves that regardless of what kind of person they are, because we can assume that if you're studying to be a religious leader, you're like Pope Francis, right? They're all pretty good people, right? But it's the situation around them that changes how they act, right? And so psychologists think that attributing, certain actions to personality traits is a fundamental attribution error. You're attributing it to the wrong thing. We shouldn't be talking about virtues of character because personality traits don't exist. They're not stable enough to affect our everyday decisions. And in most moral situations, it's actually the circumstances which changes how we do things, right? And so that's a huge attack on Aristotle's version of virtue ethics, right? But then there's always the defense, right? And the defense of Aristotelian virtue ethics is that, well, okay, even if these personality traits don't exist, the concept of virtue being good can be seen as a useful fiction, as a piece of useful fiction, right? Because being told that it's virtuous to be sociable, to have pro-social behavior, that's going to benefit society, right? And so it's not like we should just stop talking about virtues, because it's still useful, right? It's still useful in socializing people, and it's going to result in pro-social behavior, right? For example, if you help someone, and then someone tells you, well, what a virtuous thing of you to do, you're probably going to do that more, right? And so even if character traits don't actually exist, virtue is still a very helpful concept, and we should keep using it, right? And so that's about all I have to say about Aristotle. Are there anything else you'd like to add? No? Well, okay. There's one more thing, and it's recent modern developments on Aristotelian virtue ethics, right? And what's exciting about this is that at the forefront of this is someone called Rosalind Hursthouse, who was a New Zealand philosopher. I think she's, I don't know if she's still teaching. She must be 90 or something, right? But remember at the start, we said that Aristotle assumes that everything exists for a purpose, right? But now that's not such a strong assumption anymore, because you have the existentialists who attack it. You have any atheist would probably attack it and say, well, if there's no God, then not everything exists for a purpose. What if we're just random, right? So instead, Hursthouse says, well, we should be virtuous not because it's our purpose to be a human, but because being virtuous is necessary for us to be happy, right? To achieve eudaimonia, right? Eudaimonia means like the perfect state of fulfillment for people, right? And if you don't possess virtues of being good, then you can't achieve goodness. You can't achieve happiness. You can't achieve fulfillment, right? Because fulfillment entails that we're helping people, and that's what makes us feel satisfied. Right? And so that's the modern concept of virtue ethics, which kind of fixes this problem of humans not having a purpose. Right? Yeah.
What are your thoughts on virtue signaling?
What is that? Can you explain?
It's like you do things with the intention of presenting yourself as a morally good person. Maybe like your motive is just to appeal to others.
Right. Well, it depends on how consistent you are then. If you're extremely consistent with your virtue signaling and you always do good things, then that's perfectly reasonable, right? I feel like it's perfectly reasonable, because like the psychologists did say that virtue, it's not a real thing, right? Character traits are not real, right? And so virtue ethics is only useful because it makes us virtue signal, right? Everyone's always virtue signaling at all times because your virtuous personality doesn't exist. It's not a real thing, right? And so if you're consistent with it, then I think it should be fine.
So the motivation for being virtuous doesn't really matter. As long as it's like more about what we're doing as opposed to why we're doing it.
Yeah, well, that's what I think, right? But Aristotle would definitely say that you have to be virtuous for the sake of virtue, whatever that means. All right, you have to be virtuous for the sake of virtue, not because you want to come off as a presentable person, right? But I don't think that's I think that's pretty bullshit. There's no reason why you should be able to do that. Okay, that might be it, guys. Thank you. Yay.